An inch of KESI is worth an inch of gold. So goes an old saying. For centuries, the finest robes worn by China's emperors were made from KESI woven silk. But what were the skills that went into KESI weaving? And could a family of modern craftsmen reproduce an original imperial robe? Find out in KESI Silk Tapestry, part of our unique handicraft series. This Pingtong ballad is not about the beautiful scenery of Suzhou. It's about KESI, a traditional tapestry weaving technique that uses fine silk and gold thread. The weaver produces a brilliant pattern from the colored silk. These KESI tapestries were woven during the Song dynasty almost 1,000 years ago. The craftsmanship is far superior to anything commonly seen in silk products. The Song Emperor Huizong wrote a poem eulogizing the skills of the famous KESI weaver Zhu Kerou. The poem, titled A Drawing of Peaches, Butterflies, and Birds, reads, "Birds perch on flowering twigs. I hear that KESI weaving is difficult." A KESI tapestry is a symbol of harmony, not to be viewed as an ordinary embroidery. For many centuries, the imperial court had a monopoly on KESI weaving. Many of the ornamental designs woven into the robes of the emperors of the Ming and Qing dynasties were KESI embroideries. Many KESI tapestries were woven using gold thread. It took so long to complete a piece that the saying arose, "An inch of KESI is worth an inch of gold." 74-year-old Wang Jialiang is a resident of Suzhou. He is a descendant of KESI weavers who served the imperial court during the Qing dynasty. Since the 1820s, 6 generations of his family have been making KESI embroidery. Wang Jialiang owns a small shop. Many tourists come to admire his KESI weaving skills. Wang Jialiang is weaving a tapestry depicting a Suzhou landscape. These KESI tapestries were woven by members of Wang Jialiang's family. Holding them up against the light, tiny openings and seams in the fabric are revealed. Because of this open work effect, some people call this kind of KESI tapestry silk sculpture. KESI tapestries are quite unlike other kinds of silk weaving. The secret lies in the particular structure of their warp and weft. This is the texture of brocade. The weaving technique is a common one, in which the warp and weft are unbroken. The threads crisscross each other closely in a straight line to form a decorative pattern. In a KESI tapestry, the weft goes back and forth in a certain area where the color is constant. When the weft reaches the edge of the area of color, it turns back. This weaving technique is called whole warp and broken weft. Using the technique of whole warp and broken weft, a KESI weaver can produce a beautiful and highly complex pattern. Even today, this technique cannot be mass-produced on machinery or approximated by other techniques. That is why KESI products are so costly. An inch of KESI is worth an inch of gold. So goes an old saying. For centuries, the finest robes worn by China's emperors were made from KESI woven silk. But what were the skills that went into KESI weaving? And could a family of modern craftsmen reproduce an original imperial robe? Find out in KESI Silk Tapestry, part of our unique handicraft series. A KESI tapestry can be appreciated from both sides. The colors and patterns on the two sides look identical. This is an outstanding feature of KESI tapestries. However, Wang Jialiang is not satisfied with the ordinary KESI technique. He has developed the unique talent of being able to produce different patterns on each side of a KESI tapestry.
这一块是叫三艺，3种不同，这个技术不同，这个面金的，这一面是银的，第二个这个面呢一个石，一个手指，反过来是这个手的，第三个呢这一面是花线，是真实的，这一面是金线的，完的不是两手的，这个是一人做的。
那它在技术上跟普通的缂丝有什么不一样吗？
这个我不觉得，戒指我没有饭吃的。
Wang Jialiang started learning KESI weaving when he was 9 years old. He's an only son, and his father passed all his skills on to him. Wang Jialiang has woven a number of particularly difficult and high-quality KESI tapestries. In 2006, he was given a drawing which he knew immediately would be very difficult to reproduce as a tapestry. This is a ceremonial robe worn by Emperor Wanli of the Ming Dynasty. It bears 12 KESI woven designs of the inscription, happiness, longevity, and satisfaction. The emperor wore what was his most important ceremonial robe only when he attended a major event or celebration. The Chinese characters for longevity and the swastikas on the imperial robe are woven with pure gold thread. The golden dragon pattern is woven with emerald peacock feathers. In all, the robe took 13 years to make. Regrettably, after the robe was removed from the Dingling Mausoleum where Emperor Wanli was buried, it became tattered and fragile. It was placed in a storeroom for safekeeping. In 2006, the Capitol Museum reopened to the public. Several years earlier, the museum had decided to make a replica of Emperor Wanli's ceremonial robe to put on display. But they soon ran into difficulties.
最难完成就是纬线的密度，每公分100根，1毫米中间你就要织10根儿，一想，这个难度就是很难达到。一般的，好比说你到40、50，40、50，顶多到60，感觉到60就感觉密得不得了了。
Wang Yaorong was put in charge of the project to duplicate the imperial robe. She and her colleagues scoured China, looking for skilled KESI weavers. But even after several years, they had failed to find even one.
一到最后呢，就因为原来我带的一个研究生吧，他的课题就是专门研究KESI，正好他在这调查的时候就发现了那个苏州还有一家，说那个他那个叫王家良。
In 2006, Wang Jialiang and his son were invited to Beijing. They met Wang Yaorong for the first time.
反正给我感觉呢，是老老实实的手艺人，尤其王家良连普通话都不会讲，是吧？他的儿子呢，比他讲的好一点。
这个主要是复制，要跟远近基本上要一致下来，所以挺难的呀，压力挺大的。
Wang Jialiang and his son were asked to make an exact copy of the famous imperial robe. The size, cut, quality, and patterns had to be identical to the original. Also, the original weaving technique had to be used. It was a huge undertaking for which they would need the help of several other artisans. For Wang Jialiang and his son, the imperial robe was unlike anything they'd ever worked on before. The original imperial robe could not be removed from its case, which made their task even more difficult. In 2006, Wang Jialiang started work. Duplicating the ceremonial robe of Emperor Wanli would require all 5 of his family's KESI looms. Several years passed and the work continued. The two KESI weavers are concentrating on the silk thread in their hands. They put them into bamboo reeds and arrange them in neat lines. There are 20 gaps per centimeter between the thin bamboo reeds for the warp threads to pass through. After the warp threads are passed through the bamboo reeds, they're secured with glue to the wooden spools.
就这样，哎，把它抓上去。为什么要用梳子呢？这个距离这么宽度，所以这边狭的，所以没办法只好用梳子。这样的话，这个距离都一样的，是吧？是不是啊？
The sheet of warp threads is composed of more than 1,400 strands of silk. This is the skeleton of a KESI pattern. The weaver must keep the warp threads straight and tight all the time while working on them.
这样，压住以后，往下卷，卷的时候不是这个都直了吗？都紧了吗？所以这个劲都直了，是不是？
这需要很大力气吧？
对，这个很大力气把它绷紧一下，这样绷一下的话嘛，较紧了。
Wang Jialiang traces the designs of the imperial robe onto the sheet of warp threads. He'll weave the decorative patterns according to the drawings. The traditional technique for making gold thread is to hammer a piece of gold into extremely thin strands, and then wrap them around strands of silk. Colored silk is indispensable in weaving KESI patterns. There are 28 different colors of silk in Emperor Wanli's robe. Finding an exact match for the replica is very difficult. The biggest problem Wang Jialiang and his son face is the density of the weft. Commonly, in weaving a KESI tapestry, the weft threads are thicker than the warp threads. But in Emperor Wanli's robe, the warp threads are thicker than the weft threads. Achieving the required density with threads that are just 1/100th of a centimeter thick is a huge challenge.
这个线只有4的呀，你线粗的话，用那个拨，你还是拨不到100。你太细了的话，那个线，那要超过100根了，是不是啊？还是不行。
An inch of KESI is worth an inch of gold. So goes an old saying. For centuries, the finest robes worn by China's emperors were made from KESI woven silk. But what were the skills that went into KESI weaving? And could a family of modern craftsmen reproduce an original imperial robe? Find out in KESI Silk Tapestry, part of our unique handicraft series. After several months, Wang Jialiang and his son brought a sample of the replica of the imperial robe to Beijing. It was rejected. The problem was the uneven density of the weft. The number of weft threads wasn't always 100 per centimeter. Wang Jialiang and his son came to Beijing 7 times in all, bringing samples. Why was Wang Jialiang, a highly skilled KESI weaver, unable to deal with such a basic problem as thread density? The problem lay in the execution. During the weaving process, the weaver tightens every weft thread with a bamboo plectrum. He has to apply an even force with his hands and to move the plectrum with the same rhythm to achieve a uniform result. The weaver repeats the same movement tens, even hundreds of thousands of times a day. In this respect, the human hand is far inferior to a machine. The weaver has to apply the utmost hand strength to pack 100 weft threads into 1 centimeter, maintaining the same force in his hand for every one. If he relents even slightly at any time, the whole piece will be ruined. The high demands placed on replicating cultural relics have fueled the development of this unique craft.
经过几次试验以后，他们知道一直都是一种很紧张的，形成了一种新的，就是工作惯性，他就慢慢的是拨那个尾啊，他就都能达到要求了。
In the final sample, the texture is much tighter and finer than that of other KESI products. There is no sign of the usual tiny holes. The corrugated effect is outstanding. The unique texture is the essence of a KESI product. The progress of craftsmanship never stops, no matter how challenging it has become. The peacock feathers still need to be woven into the imperial robe. At the Capitol Museum, the peacock feathers are being processed to make threads. A peacock feather contains around 100 filaments. The ones at the root of the tuft are too thin, and those at the tip are too tough. Only the filaments in the middle section are long and soft enough to be used in weaving a KESI pattern. The knotted small peacock feathers are twisted with silk yarn into dazzling peacock thread. It's a time-consuming job, and the Capitol Museum took responsibility for it so that Wang Jialiang and his son could finish their weaving sooner. The weavers of the Wang family cannot remember how many difficulties they had to overcome in making the replica of the imperial robe. This piece was discarded because it had some defects. 3 months of hard work were wasted. It took 5 members of Wang Jialiang's family 3 years to finish the replica of the imperial robe. It was the biggest and longest weaving project they had ever undertaken. In 2009, the replica of the ceremonial robe of Emperor Wan Li was put on display at the Capitol Museum. "50,000 meters of gold thread, 6,000 peacock feathers, and 3 kilograms of colored silk were used in making it. It contains 12 coiling dragons, 12 auspicious designs depicting the sun and stars, as well as 279 swastikas, 256 characters for longevity, 301 bats, and 271 other good luck symbols. The superb weaving skill and painstaking arrangement of the weft threads make this replica of Emperor Wanli's ceremonial robe the most exact copy of an imperial robe ever made. Nature provides the material, and from it, goldfish breeders create beautiful works of art. The secret of their craft lies in repeated, meticulous screening. But why is the city of Hangzhou so important in goldfish breeding in China? And what are the challenges facing the country's goldfish breeders today? For the answers, stay tuned for Goldfish Breeding, part of our unique handicraft series.